especially in urban Zimbabwe. I'm going to introduce a man who has insisted that I read his profile. He is a Zimbabwean engineer. He has a BSc Engineering and Civil Engineering from the University of Cape Town and an MSc in Public Health Engineering from Imperial College in London. He worked for 10 years in the city of Harare. Then he was with a consulting firm in Harare for 30 years. Since 2011, he has been a freelance consultant in his work for UNICEF, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and GIZ. He has done assessments of water and sanitation in all the major centers of Zimbabwe and a lot of the smaller centers as well. He most enjoys designing water and wastewater treatment plants. Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about urban water and waste in Zimbabwe, please put your hands together for Engineer Peter Morris.
Honourable Deputy Minister, President of the Institute of Architects, fellow guests. My title today is Urban Water and Wastewater in Zimbabwe. And I'll just give you a brief overview of the presentation. So I'll give you broad picture views of water supply limits in Bulawayo and Harare, sanitation in Bulawayo and Harare, and some issues in high-density housing areas. I'll then look at low-density on-site water supply and effluent disposal, including limitations on on-site water supply from boreholes and on-site effluent treatment and disposal, and then I'll give a conclusion at the end. So let's start with Bulawayo. It's actually the best run local authority in Zimbabwe. The system is in Gwani Dam. Bulawayo has a number of dams. The available yield is 100 megalitres a day. The dams are all in the Mzingwane catchment, which is the driest catchment area in the country. And in the last century, the rainfall has reduced by 15.3%. And the yield from the dams has reduced by 54% since the 1990s. Because what happens is, as the climate is warming, in addition to the reduced rainfall, you're getting more evaporation. When the rain comes, there's a much bigger groundwater deficit to make up before you can get runoff. Looking at the water treatment and delivery, design capacity is 262 megalitres per day. Current is 165. Move on. There's also a supplementary supply from Nyamadlova Wellfield, which is to the north of Bulawayo, but it's only giving 7 megalitres a day. So, looking at how much water do they need, their demand without rationing is 140 megalitres per day. If you look at per capita consumption, that's a heck of a lot less than Harare, because of all the droughts that Bulawayo has experienced. The population is well trained to conserve water. Sorry, duplicate slide. Next one. So just to summarize it, their dam yield is 100. They can currently deliver 166 plus the 7 megalitres from Nyamadlova. The demand for water is 140. So in fact, although a lot of their treatment and delivery capacity, not all of it is functioning, because there's some very old plant down at the Nemo Works. But nevertheless, they're still delivering more than their demand. And what Bulawayo needs is more sources of water. Let's move on to Harare. The available yield of the dams is 437 million litres a day. Harare actually has an allocation of 529. And the reason being that the allocation is more than the yield, because the yield has reduced since that allocation was given. So there's been a reduction in mean annual runoff from 145 millimeters to 135 millimeters. That's the depth of rainfall that actually reaches the rivers. It's probably due to climate change, and there have also been increased upstream allocations. Moving on to how Harare can actually extract, deliver and treat the water. Their treatment plants, the design capacity is 700 megalitres a day. Current is about 400 because there's some old plant that's not working. Current production though is less than 300. They're not producing and delivering what they could be. And the reason being is that the production is limited by available revenue to purchase treatment chemicals. Next one. So let's look at some numbers. I was part of a World Bank study in 2015, so the figures are a little bit out of date, but in 2015, non-revenue water was 56%. So that's water produced, which they don't ultimately bill. Now, 55% of that was apparent losses, so that's non-functioning meters, people not on the billing system, all that kind of administrative stuff. And 45% was real losses, which is what's leaking out of the pipes into the ground. I know the situation has got a lot worse since then. Now, the pipe life is 40 to 50 years. The Germans did a very good study on the, so it wasn't the Germans, a big part, the Dutch, did a really good study on putting pipes out, examining their condition, and we've always worked with the loan funds for pipe work. You work on a 40 to 50 year life, and they actually confirmed that. Most of the pipe financial. You can come up with all sorts of technical solutions, but until the city sorts out its managerial and financial issues, it's not going to work. So that is the real limitation on why we in Harare are not getting water. A lot of that, I think, is because people are not being billed. Who here gets a bill from the municipality? It runs off. Some of it evaporates from the surface. Most of it goes down to recharge the soil moisture deficit that has built up since the last rainy season. Because you've got all the plants and vegetation transpiring, and they're consuming the water that's in the soil. So that soil has to be saturated before the water can go into the water table where your borehole can reach it. So that's 5%. Now, you do the sums, that's 438 litres per day from your 1 acre plot. Now, that's enough for careful domestic use. It ain't enough to water your lawn, to top up your pool, or water your verges. I'd now like to talk about on-site effluent disposal for cluster houses. Now, there have been a large number of cluster house developments going on in the low-density suburbs of Harare in areas which are not sewered. So, some of the regulations, the Regional Town and Country Planning, Subdivision and Consolidation Regulations of 1976. They're old, but they're actually quite well drafted, and they're still in effect. Now, the minimum subdivision area for a single dwelling on septic tank is 2,000 square meters when there is reticulated water supply. The Environmental Management Authority has a bunch of rules. It's all covered under the Environmental Management Act. if you're going to discharge treated effluent to the environment, it's regulated by SI 6 of 2007, and there are stringent limits for discharge to the environment. It's actually, we have the most stringent limits on effluent parameters in the region, much more stringent than South Africa or Botswana or Zambia. And then, I must be one of the few people who still remembers this, but it is actually still in effect. The Public Health Effluent Regulations, Rhodesia Government Notice 638 of 1972 as amended in 1974-1978. So if you're going to dispose of treated effluent with irrigation, this specifies the health requirements to be met. And if you're disposing near buildings or swimming pools, the requirements are actually quite stringent. Now, in terms of the procedures, the Town Planning Department, if you are, I'm talking to architects, you must know this. You submit your plans, and there's an approval process for a development permit, which includes approval of the proposed effluent treatment process, and that approval is done by Harare Water. Then there's the Environmental Management Agency. Now, a development for more than 20 people requires submission of a prospectus to the EMA, and they most likely will look at the prospectus and say, you have to submit an ESIA, that's an environmental, social impact assessment. They then issue you with a license to discharge, which comes with an application fee, and there's an annual inspection also with a fee to make sure that you're actually discharging acceptable effluent. Now let's look at the reality. I spoke to the Harare Water and Sewerage engineer, and I said two simple questions. Who approves on-site effluent treatment, and who monitors the effluent quality? He could not answer me. The district manager in my own district could not answer that question. I went to speak to Emma. I spoke to the EIA and Ecosystems Protection Department. I spoke to the head of the department. And he told me they had not had any application for a license to discharge from a cluster housing development in Harare. So there are all these, I mean, you've seen them going up, you've probably seen the advertisements in the paper, and all these developments, and Emma doesn't even know about them. Next one. Now, all of these applications in areas that are not on sewer, you see there, the site for the proposed development measures 8,000 square meters, and if the development is allowed, a resultant development density of 800 square meters will be achieved on biodigester sewage disposal system. That's typical. All of these advertisements come with that wording. And biodigester sewage disposal system. Next slide. Now, I've done wastewater treatment since 1982, and a biodigester is basically a septic tank that is modified for capture of methane. And the effluent is effectively a septic tank effluent, which can only be disposed of to a soakaway, and the 2,000 square meter rule applies. So if you've got a dozen cluster houses, 800 square meters each, there is no space for a soakaway. And the reason for it is that a soakaway actually, the long-term acceptance rate of effluent onto a soakaway is 20 litres per square metre per day. So if you've got let's say you're discharging 50 litres per person, you're looking at 2.5 square metres per person per day. You need area for a properly functioning soakaway. Now, if your biodigester is not actually a biodigester, but something augmented to meet the requirements for irrigation or discharge to the environment, it's actually not a biodigester, it's a package treatment plant. And that's going to require aerobic treatment. And to get aerobic treatment on a confined site, you need pumps and blowers. And if you're irrigating your houses, you also need disinfection. Now, problems with packaged treatment plants. They consume energy. So there's a cost there which has to be borne by the residents. They require skilled maintenance. And it is beyond the ability of a homeowners association to operate and maintain such a plant. In over 40 years of practice, I have not seen a single packaged plant, and I'm talking about mines, hotels, industry, that has run for more than 2 or 3 years before it breaks down, because there's nobody with the skills to do the maintenance. So use of packaged plants will result in environmental disaster. So, just conclusion. Looking at the water, Bulawayo's water is limited by source constraints. Bulawayo needs more sources of water. Next one. Harare's water is limited by poor financial management. Harare's high-density housing has a major health problem for unserviced areas and also serviced areas with intermittent or no water supply. And the solution is simple. City of Harare must just fulfill its responsibilities. All the regulations or the Urban Council Act, all the statutory instruments, it's all there. It just needs to be implemented. Next one. For cluster housing developments, on-site water supply and effluent disposal will not work. Harare must supply water, and in unsewered areas developers must not propose, and Harare must not permit cluster housing. Next one. I conclude. Thank you for your time.